Welcome back to the Gunners Club. You're here with myself, Gunner, and of course with Seuss. And how are you going?
I'm pretty damn good for a Saturday morning, and I've got my morning
Yeah,
coffee.
we've got our ice cold treat. Good way to start the day. I've already done boxing this morning, but I think I need a good stiff coffee, and this is the one.
And I got up in the morning.
That itself is a miracle. Now, you've watched The Big Bang Theory.
I have.
Do you ever remember them mentioning a game called Dungeons and Dragons?
I did, yes. Sheldon was an avid player, apparently.
You might remember as a kid, I used to play it. I used to be quite into D&D.
You did, with your brother, I believe.
That's right.
And your old man
And
actually
Daddy.
played it for a while.
That's right. Now, the age I am now with grey hair, I've actually decided to get back into it. I've decided to get back into it probably because, in part, I'm trying to get back to that lost youth. Oh, where did it go? But also, it's a bit of a wish fulfillment. I mean, what do you do once you've got the car you've always wanted and you're living where you want to live and you're just living the dream? Do you know you can get into D&D for as little as $20?
No?
So I'll show you this. I picked this up the other day. This is the starter set of Dungeons and Dragons. It's the 5th edition, so they've been doing it for a while. This has been play tested, the 5th edition, play tested by over 175,000 players. So they tested the rules before it came out. But in the starter set, you've got everything you need to get going. For me, that's important because I want to recapture the feeling of what it was like. I played a cleric, and basically I wanted to get back in and explore the dungeons and explore the idea of fighting against dragons and finding magic items and working up problems.
You just like wearing robes.
Yeah, robes
I
has
think
always
so.
been a thing
Yeah.
for me.
Yeah, I thought so. Yeah.
But to play D&D, you need a couple of things. You need the rules, you need some friends. You also need these polyhedral dice. Now, this comes in the pack. Most people who play, they start to invest and get more fancy dice. I picked these up for just $12. They're, translucent green, quite pretty. You literally can spend hundreds of dollars on dice and get some really beautiful things. But the starter set, I just want to talk you a little bit through it. You do get the rule book. Now, this is only about 40 pages, the starter rule book. It's
Right.
basically nothing. In a couple of hours' time, you can understand what the game's all
I'm-
about
I'm sorry,
and how
what?
it works. Yeah, it's only about 40 pages, and you only need a couple of hours to
To-
understand how it works.
Okay. I don't think I have enough time left on this earth to get familiar with
Well,
those
look,
rules.
the good thing is you really only need one person who's the expert on the rules, and
Ah.
they're called the Dungeon Master or the
Okay.
Game Master.
Cool.
And what their job is to share the world which is in an adventure, and to let the customers, the other players know what their backstory is, what the reason is for being in the adventure, and what the limitations are, and the promises of that character. So let's say that you're in a world with the ancient Greek gods, for example. You might be going across temples like, the Temple of Poseidon that you'd find in Greece. You might stumble across the Oracle of Delphi. And you might have a quest to get wisdom of an oncoming battle to stop a war. Let's say that's the adventure. You're playing, let's say, as a thief, and you might belong to a thieves guild, and you've got a personal reason to be there. So it's more than just finding out the wisdom to stop a war. It might be that your sister is being sold into slavery or something like that. Really, the backstory can be whatever you want it to be, and the character you play can be whatever you want it to be as well. This is the first adventure which comes in the box. It's called Dragons of Stormwreck Isle. And in it, there's all sorts of crises and adventures. So there's adventures with dragons, there's adventures with fungus type creatures which are sentient beings. There's adventures with zombies and a sunken
A
ship.
thinking fungus.
Yeah, who would have thunk it? What you need to play the game is basically a character sheet, and the good thing with the starter set is they've already determined the character sheet for you. So it means you don't have to spend hours and hours understanding the game. There's your character sheet there. Easily said, you do need to read it. When you start off, you can get the Essentials kit and read through it. Look, I've been reading it for about 5 hours. I've got the gist of it. I think I'm ready to start playing it now. It's been a while since I played D&D. And if you have a look how they recommend it, there's the Essentials kit. You can go on there to either another kit, or you can go straight from that to the really advanced Dungeons and Dragons. Let me show you what that looks like. Something I picked up. Now, like I said, that's the easy, light section. It's about 40 pages.
Oh dear.
Plus the adventure. You ready for this?
I do like the graphics and the pictures are
Yeah, the
people of
artwork is
this.
just splendid. Now have a look at this. These are the core rules for Advanced Dungeons and Dragons when you want to get into it. Have a feel of how heavy that is. Now
That
there's more.
reminds me. This reminds me of the weight of the old yellow pages when you were
Yes, yes.
when you were picked up by the cops for maybe having a little too much, and they would give you an attitude adjustment with one of those
Would
phone
something
books.
like this be used?
That's for extreme cases.
So what comes in this? You can pick this up in Australia for about $200. You get a beautiful screen, and the screen is basically so that the person who's running the game can keep the maps and details of the plot separate from the players. It's actually very pretty. Have a look at this. I'll just open it up. That's a beautiful screen. It's got a fantastic full spread of a dragon. I'll let you have a look at that. So if you're playing, you've got that beautiful view of the dragon.
Wow.
Dragons are obviously, one of the apex monsters. But this whole tome here, and have a look how beautifully this is printed. It's like a foil art rendering, isn't it? It's vivid. It's almost living.
Well,
This is the monster manual, so it's chock full of all sorts of dragons and monsters and things like that. You'll find some of them it could be allies. Most of them you'll find they'll be fiends. And then this is the player's handbook. Really, I recommend that if you decide if the starter kit's for you and you like it and you want to continue playing, that you do get this set. The player's handbook tells you about all the different sorts of classes that you can play. If you wanted to cast magic, what sort of a magic user would you want to be? Would you want to be a warlock, for example? Would you want to be a wizard? Or do you want to do it through cleric type abilities?
or maybe someone like Bewitched. Elizabeth Montgomery.
That's right. And
There
she
you go.
always used to nose, didn't she?
That's it. Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, in the best way.
But it also gives you all sorts of ideas as the weapons which are available, and a lot of the backdrops of your character and ways to create who it is that you want to play. And then finally, last but not least at all, is a Dungeon Master's Guide. Again, I just love this artwork. There's a whole cosmology in here. It's all about creating worlds more than anything else. To be honest with Dungeons and Dragons, you don't need that many tables. You don't need that many different throws of the dice. What you need is just a small understanding of which reference pages to go to. For example, you could be playing a game and let's say that you're in the mines of Moria, like in the first book of Lord of the Rings. And your character is moving, and that at each movement there's a chance of them being heard by the enemy. Well, you'd throw basically the dice against a table to determine whether you've been hurt or not. If in fact finally you were hurt, there could be a fight, and then you'd roll for initiative to see who would get to fight first, roll to see how much damage you get to inflict on the other party, and it works basically that way. So there's tables which determine the likelihood of things happening and what your abilities are. In a way, I think storytelling's changed a lot, because when D&D started, it was all about the old-fashioned... You were in the army,
Yes.
Sus, right? Do you remember, sometimes you go on exercise, I went to Singleton, and we had a whole war room set up. And we had the maps, and we had the pictures of the soldiers and stuff like that.
Yep.
And people would move the characters. Now with D&D, you can have figures. And some people like to paint the miniatures and move them on hexagonal maps and things like
Yep,
that to
yep.
know where they are at. But it really developed from that, where the difference was, instead of them just being units of infantry or cavalry that were moved, what if you were the protagonist? What if you were the person who had the fate of themselves in their own hands? And that's really what happened with D&D. They said, well, let's have a look and transfer it to the individual player. Just like when I was a kid in the 80s and the Choose Your Own Adventure books came out. It wasn't
remember those.
Yeah, it wasn't that you were having to read somebody else's story. It became what do you decide that you're going to do? Do you turn left, turn to page 45? Do you turn right?
That's right. That's right.
But imagine that, where every single decision that's possible can be decided upon. Let's say, for example, you're close to a fire and there's a goblin close by. Do you decide to draw your sword? Do you decide to retreat? Do you decide to flick the embers of the coals in the goblin's face? all of these things are possible, or you decide to basically do nothing through panic. So these are things which these books
I'm
help the game master
I'm going to
determine.
decide to stand there and pick my nose and flick it at him.
You could do that, but then you see there's always got to be some drama and some compelling reason to be there. Now, you're probably there, let's say, to rescue your half brother, let's say, in which case you wouldn't be picking a nose. Or it might be that one of your friends has been wounded and they're actually bleeding out whilst you're picking your nose. So suddenly there's that urgency and that meta reason for you to actually engage with the enemy.
Okay, I'd offer him a drink.
Now, there's been a lot of people talking about, you know, panic with ethics and the satanic panic and things like that with Dungeons and Dragons. The guy who created it, or one of the co-founders, Gary Gygax, he had this quote which I think is just absolutely masterful. He said, "Look, at the end of the day, there are no gold pieces. You come out of an adventure, you may have slayed the dragon, you might have 1,000 gold pieces, but if you check your bank balance the next day, those 1,000 gold pieces aren't in your bank balance." What we're doing is creating a world of adventure, and how much into it you want to invest is a shared agreement between you, the other characters you're playing with, and the dungeon master as well.
I'm intrigued.
There are developments with this. For example, in Greece at the moment, they're starting to talk about, you know, panic rooms is something which is really famous all around the world.
Yeah,
You're stuck in a room and you've got to use your problem-solving skills to get out.
that's right.
They're starting to combine Dungeons and Dragons with panic rooms in Greece. Now that's intriguing to me, but people have already taken this to a further degree. Have you heard of LARPing?
No, never
Because
heard
when
of
you
that.
showed me this plastic sword, I thought you'd started to get into LARPing. LARPing is basically where you dress up in costume and
Oh,
you
dear.
decide that you're a goblin for all the day and you'll go out there on the battlefield. And again, you're play fighting, but you're play fighting with rules. That's one step below where I want to go. I'm more into the theatre of the mind, and I think that's where the idea of Dungeons and Dragons really appeals to me.
Well, there you go. I mean, I've heard of it. I've never been involved with it. This is an education.
Well,
But there are so many people doing it.
It's amazing. You can go past old fantasy, and old fantasy for me is really C.S. Lewis and Tolkien. I mean, so many of the tropes of fantasy came from Tolkien, and a lot of early Dungeons and Dragons was really mimicry, in my opinion, of Tolkien. So much so that the
Okay.
Tolkien estate told them to withdraw some of the characters and things that they had because it really was heavily aping it. You can start to play now with multi-dimensional stories as well, parallel universes. I remember as a kid we were playing Expedition to the Great Barrier Peak, I think it was, and basically a spaceship had crash landed in the mountains, and we went there to explore, which is amazing because you're starting to play with different epochs of time and different expectations. So there's really everything that you want in that world, and it can be as little as that 40-page rule book, or it can be tens of thousands of pages.
I think. Can I get an abridged version of the 40-page rule book?
The bridge rule is basically pick a character, pick a backstory, and just listen to the cues from the dungeon master. And when you're asked what do you do, consider what you'll do. Roll a dice and see if you're lucky.
Well, that sounds a lot simpler than the way you explained it. That's actually no. That makes sense, provided that the dungeon master actually knows what he's doing.
That's it too.
Okay, I like it. You never know. We may be playing one day.
Thanks for being part of our adventure, and we've got many more adventures for you as well. We've been talking a lot about the collapse of the craft brewery industry
Yep.
in Melbourne, and it is only accelerating. Another one went down yesterday, another
That's
the
real
day
sad.
before. It's ongoing, but have a look at our videos. Our recent ones detail in exhausting depth the craft brewery industry in Melbourne and in Australia, and we'll see you on those.
And we also thank the beer factory
Very much so,
for their time and their expertise.
and they're great beer.
I can't forget the great beer.
Yeah.
Never have enough of that. Thanks, guys. Catch you on the next one.